At the engagement party, my stepsister, Brittany, in a pure white dress, like a white lotus swaying in the wind, snatched the MC's microphone. "Sister, I'm sorry, but I have to tell the truth, Brandon and I are truly in love." The entire hall erupted, camera flashes going wild. Brittany's voice, tearful yet clear, carried through the microphone to every corner of the grand. I stood frozen in my carefully chosen engagement gown, my fingertips icy. I looked at Brandon, the man who, just 10 minutes ago, had told me, "You're the only one for me," now standing next to Brittany. He didn't look at me. His profile, under the brilliant lights, seemed stiff, his lips tightly pressed. The whole room was eerily silent, all eyes fixed on me, waiting for my reaction. Hysteria? Tears? I took a deep breath, pushing down the icy ocean that had instantly formed in my heart. I raised my hand, not pointing at the perfect couple, but at the MC, beckoning him with a finger. The MC froze, looking somewhat lost. I spoke, my voice unexpectedly steady, even with a hint of a cold smile. "The microphone. Give it to me." The MC almost instinctively jogged over and handed me the microphone. I gripped it, my gaze slowly sweeping across the room, past the faces that held sympathy, curiosity, or schadenfreude, finally settling on Brittany and Brandon. "Brittany," I uttered her name, devoid of anger, only a condescending scrutiny. "That dress you're wearing, isn't it the one I bought you last month? With my shared credit card." The look of pitiful innocence on Brittany's face instantly froze. Without waiting for her reply, I shifted my gaze to Brandon. "Brandon, last weekend you said you were working overtime, pulling an all-nighter on a project proposal. Was she that project?" Brandon suddenly looked at me, a flicker of panic in his eyes. "Audrey, let me explain." "Explain what?" I interrupted him, my voice clear through the microphone. "Explain how you were truly in love in the house I bought, using the bed sheets I chose." Another uproar filled the hall. This time, there was less sympathy and more disdain in their eyes, and the target had changed. I took a step forward, approaching Brittany. She instinctively retreated, nearly tripping over her dress hem. "Sister," she tried to regain her victim's posture. I raised my hand, cutting her off. Then, under everyone's gaze, I slowly removed the diamond ring from my finger. The ring refracted a cold light under the lamps, once thought to represent eternity, now a joke. I didn't throw it at the couple. That would be too cheap. I gently placed it on the tray the MC was holding, emitting a crisp ding. "The engagement is off," I announced into the microphone, my voice clear and undeniable. "I wish you two. You two deserve each other. May your misery last forever." Having said that, I didn't spare them or the room full of guests another glance. I pushed the microphone back into the stunned MC's hand, lifted my dress hem, turned, and, in my 3-inch heels, walked step by step, steadily towards the hotel. Behind me, there was a dead silence, then an explosion of whispers. I knew that tomorrow, no, tonight, I would become the city's laughingstock. But so what? He who laughs last, laughs longest. Stepping out of the hotel, the night wind blew cool against my face. I took out my phone and dialed a number. "Hello, Mr. Dawson?" I said, my voice steady, without a tremor. "It's me, Audrey. I want to draw up a will for all my assets, including my shares in the Sterling." "Yes, immediately, right now." The call ended, and the night wind no longer felt so cold. I didn't call a car. I just walked slowly along the sidewalk, the sound of my heels clicking on the ground exceptionally clear in the quiet night. My mind wasn't blank. It was working at lightning speed, like a precision instrument, calculating gains and losses, planning routes, returning to that so-called home. It was, as expected, brightly lit. Pushing open the door, my stepmother, Victoria, sat upright on the living sofa, her face showing a perfectly feigned concern, but I didn't miss the hint of triumph in her eyes. Brittany sat beside her, her eyes red and swollen, clinging to her as if she had suffered a huge injustice. Brandon wasn't there. He likely had no face to come in. My father, Arthur, who was always easily swayed, sat with a sullen face in the head. Seeing me enter, his brows furrowed even deeper. "You're finally back," he spoke first, his tone accusing. "Look at the scandal you caused today. You've completely disgraced the Sterling family." I almost laughed out loud. Disgraced? Who is truly disgraced? I didn't change my shoes. walking straight to the armchair opposite them and sitting down. My posture even relaxed. Disgraced? I repeated, my gaze sweeping over Brittany. Arthur, do you think being cheated on by my stepsister and my fiancé at my own engagement party is disgraceful? Arthur choked, his face growing even darker. That's still no reason for you to make a scene in such a public setting. Couldn't you have discussed privately at home? Now look. The whole city is laughing at our Sterling family. Victoria immediately chimed in softly, playing peacemaker. Arthur, don't blame Audrey. She's just upset. Audrey, Brittany is young and foolish. It was a momentary lapse. Brandon, he might have also acted on impulse. Look, things are already like this. We're family. If we discuss privately, we can surely resolve this. The family? I interrupted her, my voice not loud, but it made Victoria's smile freeze on her face. Aunt, when your daughter and my fiancé were rolling around together, did you ever consider us family? Brittany suddenly looked up, her voice tearful. Sister, how can you say that? Brandon and I are truly. I cut her off, my gaze icy. Your true love is spending my money while sleeping with my man? Brittany, your true love is truly cheap. Audrey, Arthur slammed his hand on the table. Watch your choice of words. No matter how wrong Brittany is, she's still your sister. Arthur, I turned to him. My heart felt like it was clogged with ice shards, but my voice remained steady. I remember, before my mother passed, she specifically left me 15% of the Sterling shares under my name. Didn't she? Arthur paused, clearly not expecting me to bring this up so suddenly. Why are you mentioning that? Victoria's eyes instantly sharpened, and she unconsciously sat up straighter. No reason, I said blandly. I just contacted Mr. Dawson and drew up a will. A will? Arthur looked at me in shock. What are you doing? I'm not doing anything reckless. I looked him in the eye, saying each word clearly. I'm making a will that states if any accident should befall me, all my assets, including that 15% of the group's shares, will be donated entirely to a charitable foundation. Not a penny left behind. The room fell into a deathly silence. Victoria's face instantly turned pale, and even Brittany forgot to cry, looking at me in terror. Although my father controlled the Sterling now, this 15% stake was crucial, enough to hold significant sway on the board meeting. Weren't those two, scheming and scrambling, after this very thing? I had just cut off their hopes. You, who are you threatening? Arthur's fingers trembled with anger. I'm not threatening anyone. It's self-preservation. I stood up, looking down at them. From today forward, I, Audrey, and you, are no longer family who discuss privately. I walked to the door, paused, but didn't turn back. Oh, and Arthur, tomorrow I'll be at the Sterling on time. I'll be taking the position of associate of the project department. After all, I paused, a hint of almost imperceptible mockery in my voice. A major shareholder with 15% of the shares can't just sit idly all day. People might really start to think there's no one left in the Sterling family. With that, I pulled open the door and walked out, leaving the room full of shock, anger, and calculation behind me. Entering the Sterling project department wasn't as easy as I'd imagined. Victoria's influence reached further than I thought, and there were many subtle and overt obstacles. But I had prepared myself. By proving my ability and delivering results, coupled with the invisible shield of my 15% stake, I managed to gain a foothold over several months. One evening, I was working late into the night. The garage was empty and quiet. As I reached my car, a familiar and nauseating voice spoke from behind me. Audrey. I paused, but didn't turn, continuing to unlock my car door with the keys. Brandon quickly walked a few steps, blocking my car door. He looked a bit haggard, with dark circles under his eyes, his once high-spirited demeanor now clouded with gloom. Can we talk, please? He asked, his tone pleading, his eyes showing a carefully calculated regret. Only then did I look up at him, my gaze calm and unwavering. Mr. Brandon, what is there left for us to discuss? How you discussed your true feelings with my stepsister in bed? Brandon's face paled, as if my bluntness had wounded him. Audrey, I know I was wrong. I'm a complete bastard, but she seduced me. I was momentarily confused. Alcohol was to blame. My heart has always belonged to you. Such a familiar script. I almost applauded his lack of imagination. Oh, I raised an eyebrow. So, Brittany held a knife to your throat and forced you into bed with her? Forced you to tacitly acknowledge your true love at the engagement party? I was stunned and panicked at the time. I was afraid she would make it even more embarrassing. He desperately argued, trying to reach for my hand. I stepped back, avoiding his touch, my eyes showing undisguised disgust. Don't touch me. You make me feel disgusted. Brandon's hand froze in midair, his face alternating between green and white. Audrey, do you have to be so harsh? Our years of history? I cut him off with a scoff. Brandon, don't bring up history again. It only makes me feel disgusted. Are you coming to me now because you've realized Brittany is utterly useless beyond playing the victim? Or because you've discovered this 15% stake I hold is far more valuable than you imagined? He was hit close to home, his eyes flickering, but his tone grew more agitated. No, Audrey, I genuinely regret it. Give me another chance. Let's start over. I promise. Promise what? A slightly lazy yet magnetic male voice interrupted. Brandon and I turned simultaneously. Not far off, leaning against a black sports car, stood a tall man. The dim light outlined his sharp jawline. He was idly playing with his car keys. His posture relaxed, yet his gaze held a certain sharpness, fixed on Brandon. It was Julian, the founder and CEO of Starlight, a partner our company had been eager to secure recently, a man whose capabilities and background were unfathomable. We had met at several project negotiation meetings and had a good impression of each other, but only professionally. Why was he here? Julian strolled over, naturally positioning himself beside me, creating an invisible shield. He was much taller than me, and the pressure he exerted made Brandon instinctively take half a step back. Mr. Brandon, is it? Julian's tone was calm, yet carried undeniable authority. Harassing a lady, especially one who clearly doesn't want to be disturbed, is not the act of a gentleman. Brandon's face darkened. Mr. Julian, this is a private matter between Audrey and me. It's none of your business. Private matter? Julian chuckled lightly, his gaze sweeping over me with a subtle question. I gave an almost imperceptible nod. He then looked back at Brandon. Director is now a vital partner of Starlight. Her affairs, in a way, are my affairs. Moreover, he paused, a hint of playful mockery in his voice. After getting used to simple fare, you've discovered you still prefer a feast, and now you want to come back? You'll have to ask if the feast is still willing to serve you. Brandon was speechless. His face flushed. Julian didn't look at him again, nodding slightly to me. Director, do you need a ride? No, Mr. Julian. Thank you, I said, pulling open the car door. I can handle it myself. I got into the driver's seat, closed the car door, separating myself from the two men outside. The moment I started the engine, I saw Julian pat Brandon's shoulder through the car window and say something to him. Brandon's face instantly turned ashen. I wasn't interested in what Julian said, but I knew that after tonight, Brandon should fully recognize reality. Audrey, was not an object he could summon or dismiss at will. I pressed the accelerator, and the car smoothly exited the parking. In the rearview mirror, Brandon stood forlornly in place, and Julian, he stood there, watching my car leave, a meaningful smile seemingly playing on his lips. Julian's intervention was like a reality check, temporarily extinguishing Brandon's blatant harassment, but he didn't disappear. Instead, like a rat in the gutter, he retreated into the more unsettling shadows. A few days later, I was in my office reviewing a crucial bidding proposal when my assistant's intercom buzzed. Her voice sounded a bit tense. Director, the front desk downstairs says some reporters want to interview you about some rumors regarding your personal life. My gaze turned cold. Here it comes. Tell them I'm working and not accepting any interviews unrelated to work. But they seem to have received some photos. The assistant's voice dropped even lower. Photos? I immediately thought of Brandon and Brittany. Such cheap tactics were certainly in line with their style. I hung up and immediately called a media friend I knew to inquire. The information quickly came back. Someone had anonymously tipped off several tabloid media outlets, claiming I was a dominant woman with extreme possessiveness, which drove my fiancé to seek affection elsewhere. They even attached some edited and out-of-context evidence, such as a blurry recording of an old argument between Brandon and me, only featuring the parts where my voice was raised, and times I'd worked all night in the office due to stress, which were twisted into portraying me as a workaholic neglecting her partner. Public opinion was being deliberately manipulated, attempting to brand me as the culprit responsible for the relationship's breakdown, while Brandon and Brittany were cast as poor souls forced to seek true love. This wasn't just to disgust me, it was to utterly ruin my reputation, undermine my authority in the company, and potentially even affect the upcoming important project bidding. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Anger wouldn't solve anything. Just then, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered, and Brandon's voice came through, filled with a reckless and vicious determination. "Audrey, seen the news? This is just the beginning. If you don't want your reputation completely destroyed, you'd better be sensible. Let's meet and talk about your 15% stake. Perhaps it can be held in a different way." He had finally revealed his true colors. Not for love, but for money and shares. "Brandon," I said, my voice icy, "do you really think such cheap tactics can threaten me?" "Cheap?" He scoffed on the other end. "Audrey, public opinion can destroy reputations. Look at what they're saying about you online. Dominant woman. Drove her fiancé crazy. Do you think the Sterling's board meeting will trust someone with such a ruined image to hold so many shares and a crucial position? Aunt is very worried about you. You know, Aunt." As expected, they were working together. "Meet?" I repeated, my mind rapidly calculating. "All right, time, location." He named a private room at the coffee house and a time. "Come alone," he emphasized. "Don't worry," I said, hanging up. Of course, I wouldn't go alone. I immediately contacted Mr. Dawson, briefly explained the situation, and asked him to arrange a reliable assistant with necessary equipment to wait near the coffee shop beforehand. At the same time, I dug out an old audio recording from my phone. It was from several months ago, when Brittany came to my house, feigning sympathy for my relationship troubles, but all the while probing about my mother's inheritance and share distribution, her greed almost undisguised. At the time, I was just annoyed and pressed record, intending to delete it after she left, but then forgot. Now, this audio recording might become one of my weapons for counterattack. Before the meeting, I did two things. First, I backed up that audio recording of Brittany to the cloud. Second, I sent a brief message to Julian. "Brandon and Aunt have teamed up to sling mud through the media, forcing me to discuss shares. Meeting at X coffee shop. Mr. Dawson is already arranged to be nearby." I didn't ask for help, only informed him. This was both a statement and a test. Arriving at the private room at the coffee house, Brandon was already waiting. He looked more sullen than last time, his eyes gleaming with desperate madness. "You came." He forced an ugly smile. "Looks like you're sensible after all." I sat down, not touching the coffee he pushed towards me. "Just tell me directly. What do you want?" "It's simple." Brandon leaned forward. "Transfer your 15% stake to Brittany. After all, we are family, and in the future, Brittany and I can manage the Sterling for you. Why should a girl like you work so hard? Wouldn't it be better to take the money and do something you enjoy?" He spoke with an air of entitlement, as if bestowing a great favor upon me. His shamelessness made me laugh in disbelief. "Manage it for me? Brandon, who gave you the confidence to think I would hand over what my mother left me to the family who stole my fiancé and now wants to ruin me? Audrey, don't take the easy way or face the hard consequences." Brandon slammed his hand on the table, his face twisted in a snarl. "Current public opinion is very unfavorable to you. If I add more fuel to the fire, not only will you be unable to stay at Sterling, but you'll be infamous across the entire industry. Do you believe me?" "I believe you," I said calmly, looking at him. "I believe you and Victoria are capable of any sordid intentions." But I took out my phone and gently pressed play. Brittany's voice, filled with feigned concern and blatant greed, echoed in the private room. "Sister, don't be too sad. Brandon might just be temporarily confused. But honestly, those shares Auntie left you, isn't it a lot of pressure to hold them alone? Arthur is also getting old. Won't the company rely on family in the future? Mom, Brandon, and I will all help you." Brandon's face instantly turned pale. I paused the recording, looking at him. "Tell me, if this audio recording were to circulate, would people believe the forced true love story you fabricated? Or would they believe you've long been scheming to seize my shares?" You recorded me?" Brandon pointed at me, his finger trembling. "It's wise to be wary of others." I put my phone away, especially with people like you. Just then, there was a knock on the private room door, and it was pushed open. Mr. Dawson and his assistant entered. "Ms. Audrey, we're here." Mr. Dawson gave Brandon a stony look. Brandon completely panicked. "Audrey, you framed me?" "The feeling is mutual." I stood up. "Brandon, tell Victoria and Brittany this. If they want my shares, they'll get them over my dead body. Also, My attorney has made a record of today's conversation. If I see any more false reports about me, or if I encounter any accidents at the company, this evidence will immediately go to the police station and the editor's desks at major media outlets. I looked at his face, twisted with fear and anger, and said each word distinctly, "The game has just begun. Are you ready?" With that, I ignored his murderous gaze and, accompanied by my attorney, walked out of the private room with my head held high. Mr. Dawson acted quickly, sending cease and desist letters to the media outlets spreading false information and preparing a defamation lawsuit. I released select snippets of Brittany's recording discussing the shares. Though not fully public, it was enough to shift some opinions among those in the know, allowing discerning individuals to see the true intentions. However, this didn't entirely quell the storm. The real tempest struck at the monthly board meeting. The meeting was presided over by my father, Arthur. His face was grim, clearly agitated by the recent drama. Halfway through the meeting, during a discussion of an unimportant agenda item, Director, whom I knew had close ties with Victoria, cleared his throat and spoke. "Mr. Arthur, fellow directors, before we discuss the next item, I have a concern I must voice." Director adjusted his glasses, his gaze seemingly inadvertently sweeping over me. Recently, some personal rumors regarding Director have been causing quite a stir in society. This has already had a considerable negative impact on the Sterling's reputation. Our stock price has also seen some fluctuations these past few days. I believe we need to address this issue. The fell silent, and all eyes turned to me. Victoria sat among the attendees, her head bowed, appearing as if the matter had nothing to do with her. But I caught a barely perceptible curve of her lips. Arthur frowned. "Bennett, this is a board meeting, primarily for discussing company operations, Mr. Arthur. Reputation is an intangible asset for the company." Director, another director Victoria had swayed, interjected, her tone sharp. "As an executive and a major shareholder of the company, Director's personal image is closely tied to the company's image. Now, there are rampant rumors in the outside world, saying that our internal management at Sterling is chaotic, and family discord is affecting company operations. How can we explain this to other shareholders and partners?" Her words were like an insidious remark, stabbing directly at me. Brandon and Brittany had no right to be here, but their vicious scheme was working through these swayed or already harboring ill-intentions directors. "So?" I spoke, my voice calm, breaking their synchronized rhythm. "Director, what do you suggest I do to eliminate this negative impact? Resign out of guilt? Or hand over the shares my mother left me to certain self-serving family members to manage?" Director was momentarily choked by my directness, her face slightly changing. "Director, that's not what I meant. But you must admit, the current situation stems from you." "Stems from me?" I leaned slightly forward, my gaze sharply sweeping over director, finally settling on my father's face. "Or is it because I uncovered certain individuals' sordid intentions and rejected their unreasonable demands to scheme to seize my assets, which provoked this despicable retaliation? Does victim blaming really have such a market at the Sterling's board meeting?" Director's face darkened. "Director, please watch your choice of words. We are trying to stick to the facts." "Stick to the facts?" I picked up a document in front of me. "Very well, let's stick to the facts. This is the preliminary proposal and resource assessment for Cloud, the first major project I've led since taking over the project department. Over the past 3 months, the project team has worked overtime, completing 80% of the preliminary research and architectural design, with an estimated profit margin at least 15 percentage points higher than similar projects in the same period last year." I pushed the document to the center of the conference table, and to my knowledge, Director, the South Side, overseen by your son, incurred losses last quarter due to poor decision-making. Do I need to elaborate on how many holes the company had to fill? Director, the supplier evaluation reports for the past 3 years from the procurement department you oversee also seem to have some intriguing points that require re-auditing. My tone was steady, but each word cut like a knife. This was information I had quietly gathered since joining the company. I hadn't intended to use it lightly, but if they pushed me, they shouldn't expect me to hold back. The faces of director instantly became extremely ugly. "Audrey, are you threatening us?" Director suddenly stood up. "I am merely stating facts." I met his gaze. Compared to some people attacking colleagues with cheap tabloid gossip, I believe speaking with performance and data is more befitting of the board meeting, and better serves the company's interests. I will resolve my personal matters through legal means and will absolutely not let them affect the company's normal operations. But if someone tries to cause trouble and influence company decisions using this, I paused, my voice chilling. Then I also won't mind letting everyone see who is truly harming the Sterling's interests. Though was silent enough to hear a pin drop. Arthur's gaze at me was complex, holding shock and a hint of almost imperceptible scrutiny. Just then, there was a knock on the boardroom door, and Arthur's assistant quickly entered, whispering a few words in his ear. Arthur's face changed slightly, and he looked at me, his gaze even more complex. CEO Julian from Starlight is here. He wants to have an initial discussion with our project leader about the cloud project. He said he had an agreed meeting with director. My heart stirred. I hadn't scheduled a meeting with him at this time, but his timing was perfect. Yes, Arthur, I said, maintaining my composure. Mr. Julian is very interested in cloud. I believe he is a very important potential partner. If there's nothing else, I'll go and greet Mr. Julian. I stood up, straightened my clothes, ignored the ashen faces of director and Victoria's suddenly darkened gaze, gave a slight nod to my father, then turned and walked steadily out of the boardroom. Outside, Julian stood tall and elegant, waiting. He looked at me, a knowing smile playing on his lips, as if he had just spectated a good show from a distance. Director. He extended his hand, his voice deep and pleasant. It seems I've arrived just in time? I took his hand, feeling the warmth and strength in his palm. Mr. Julian, I replied with a smile. The show is just beginning. The confrontation at the board meeting was like a resounding slap, waking up some wavering directors and thoroughly enraging Victoria. She realized that conventional methods could no longer shake me. My collaboration with Julian was steadily progressing. The cloud project had a bright future, and my foothold in the company grew more stable. She had to resort to drastic measures. The following weeks were outwardly calm. Victoria even went out of her way to be nice to me, adopting a humble demeanor at home, as if genuinely remorseful. But I knew her. This was merely the calm before the storm. I instructed Mr. Dawson to further tighten security for my shares and personal safety, and I became even more cautious at the company, personally reviewing all important documents, leaving no loopholes. However, I underestimated her madness and desperation. That afternoon, I received an urgent call from the project department, saying that the core technical parameters and preliminary cost budget draft we had prepared for the cloud project seemed to have been leaked to a competitor. The rival company, at a recent industry conference, presented a proposal highly similar to ours, and their quote was ridiculously low, clearly targeting us. This was impossible. These core data were only accessible to core project members and a very small number of executives. There was a rat inside. I immediately called an emergency meeting with the core team. The atmosphere was grim. Everyone exchanged glances, realizing the gravity of the problem. If we couldn't prove it was our original work, or if we couldn't find the source of the leak, the cloud project would likely be dead in the water. All initial investments lost, and my credibility at the company would be completely lost. All credibility. Investigate everyone who handled the documents. All access records. A full investigation. I commanded, my voice cold. Just then, an automatically pushed encrypted file suddenly popped up on my computer screen. Sent anonymously. My heart sank as I clicked it open. Inside was a clear screenshot of a financial transfer record. The recipient was an offshore shell company, and the payer's information, after several layers of disguise, ultimately pointed to a private foundation account under my name, which I rarely used and was primarily comprised of assets left by my mother. The transfer amount was huge, and the timing was just days before our core data was likely leaked. Even more damning, the email attachment contained only one sentence: Director, pleasant cooperation. Please pay the remaining balance on time. Framing, blatant framing. Almost simultaneously, the boardroom door was violently pushed open, led by director, followed by a pale-faced Arthur, and a heartbroken Victoria. Audrey, look what you've done. Director slammed a stack of printouts onto the conference table. It was the transfer record and email screenshot I had just received. Leaking confidential company secrets. Betraying us for personal gain. Embezzlement. What do you have to say for yourself? Victoria stepped forward opportunely, playing the role of publicly disowning family for the sake of integrity. Her voice tearful. Arthur, esteemed directors, I didn't want to believe Audrey would do such a thing, but the evidence is conclusive. Is she still resentful about past events? Wanting to destroy Sterling this way? This move was extremely vicious. Using my mother's private foundation account to fabricate evidence not only solidified my motive for prioritizing personal gain over public duty but also maximized the emotional impact on my father. If this charge stuck, I would not only lose my position but could also face legal prosecution for commercial crime, and that 15% stake could be forcibly frozen or disposed of. All eyes were on me, filled with shock, suspicion, and anger. Arthur looked at me with disappointment and disbelief, his lips trembling as if he wanted to say something, but no sound came out. I looked at Victoria's hypocritical facades, at director and director eagerness to kick me when I was down, and the anger that had been suppressed within me finally broke through the ice. I did not panic, nor did I immediately defend myself. I simply rose slowly, my gaze coldly sweeping over everyone in the room, finally settling on Victoria's face. Victoria. I addressed her directly by name, my voice low, yet it pierced the air like an ice pick. You truly went to great lengths to get me out of Sterling. Audrey, how can you talk to me like that? The evidence is right in front of us. Victoria clutched her chest, as if greatly provoked. Evidence? I sneered, picking up the printouts. Fabricated financial records. An anonymous framing email. Is this what you call conclusive evidence? Director, you've been in business for so many years. Can't you see how cheap and desperate these tactics are? You're just making excuses. Director shrieked. Whether they're excuses will soon be clear. I took out my phone, quickly made a few taps, then connected it to the boardroom projector. A complex fund flow analysis chart appeared on the screen, along with the registration information and affiliation map of several shell companies. This was the immediate result of the synchronized investigation I commissioned Mr. Dawson and a top cybersecurity expert to conduct after I received an anonymous email. Please take a look, everyone, I said, pointing at the screen, my tone as calm as if I were giving a regular project report. This so-called ill-gotten gain seemingly flowed out of my foundation account, but after tracing, the true source is Shell Company A, located in the British Islands. Controlling Company A is another Company B, registered in the Cayman, and the ultimate beneficial owner of Company B. I paused, my gaze cutting into Victoria like a knife. After multiple layers of penetration, it ultimately points to a woman named Victoria, and the offshore account she controls through a nominee arrangement. A gasp swept through the boardroom. The color instantly drained from Victoria's face. She looked as if she'd seen a ghost and shrieked. You're lying. You fabricated this. Arthur. She's framing me. Arthur stared at Victoria, his eyes filled with shock and horror. Ignoring her screams, I continued operating my phone and played an audio recording. It was part of what I had recorded earlier when Brandon threatened me at the cafe, clearly including his mention of Aunt is very worried about you and his attempt to pressure me into transferring shares. This is impossible. How could you? Victoria completely panicked. Incoherent. How could I know? How could I have left evidence? I finished her sentence for her. Victoria, you've forgotten. It's the digital age now. You've forgotten that my mother left me not just shares, but also the network of contacts and resources she built with her own hands. If you can find people to forge records, I can find even more top-tier experts to uncover them. I turned to Arthur, whose face was pale. Arthur, do you see it now? Who has truly wanted to destroy Sterling and steal everything my mother left me? Who has been fanning the flames, sowing discord, and even going so far as to fabricate evidence to send your own daughter to prison? Arthur staggered, looking at Victoria with a complete unfamiliarity and rage he'd never shown before. Call the police. I clearly ordered my assistant and the security personnel, who had rushed to the door upon hearing the commotion. Fabricating business documents, false accusation and defamation, suspected economic crimes. Hand all this evidence over to the police. Victoria shrieked and tried to lunge forward but was restrained by the security personnel. They erupted into chaos. I stood my ground, watching the farce, feeling no joy of victory, only a cold emptiness. Family, kinship, at this moment. They were utterly shattered. I knew this wasn't the end. Victoria might have accomplices, and Brandon and Brittany wouldn't simply disappear. But this time, I had personally pushed the biggest threat to their ruin. I walked out of the chaotic boardroom, where the sunlight was blinding. Julian was waiting outside. He leaned against the wall, watching me, his eyes complex, with a hint of admiration and concern that was hard to detect. Do you need help? He asked. I looked into the distance and exhaled slowly. Just cleaning house, I said. Next. It's everyone else's turn. Wynne was taken away by the police. Her hysterical cries and curses became the last jarring echo she left in the Sterling family. The evidence was irrefutable. Charges of fabricating business documents, false accusation and framing, and the subsequent discovery of embezzlement were enough to ensure she'd spend a considerable amount of time behind bars. Sterling seemed to have been stripped of all its false warmth overnight, leaving only emptiness and cold. After her mother's arrest, Brittany tried to visit Arthur a few times, crying with a tear-stained face, claiming she knew nothing and that her mother had orchestrated everything. But the audio recording about the shares, and her performance at the engagement, had already made her lose all credibility. For the first time, Arthur was not lenient. He coldly told her to leave and froze all Sterling family assets under Victoria's name, including Brittany's shared credit card, which had always been controlled by Victoria and whose actual source was the Sterling family. As for Brandon, I had kindly packaged the audio recording of his attempt to threaten me into transferring shares, along with some evidence of his involvement in spreading rumors, and sent them to his company and industry association. Soon, he was fired due to personal conduct issues and disgraced in the industry. He later called me once, his voice more humble and pleading than ever, begging me to grant him a way out. I only replied with one sentence: "You chose your path. You must follow it to the end, even if you have to crawl." I didn't kick him while he was down, but I certainly wouldn't offer a helping hand. Letting them struggle in their own mire was the best punishment. The family storm gradually subsided, and the obstacles within the company were also cleared. After's downfall, director and director quickly became discreet, even going so far as to express their understanding and appreciation for my previous performance at a board meeting. In the arena of self-interest, facades change so quickly. The most significant change came from my father, Arthur. One weekend after Victoria's arrest, he called me to his study. He looked much older, and the gray hairs at his temples were strikingly more numerous. On his desk, there was a photo of my mother from her youth. "Audrey," he began, his voice hoarse, laden with heavy fatigue and regret. "Arthur, I'm sorry to you, and I'm sorry to your mother." I didn't speak, just watched him quietly. I was blindly misled. Wrapped around that mother and daughter's finger, he closed his eyes in pain. "I let you suffer. If you hadn't been strong and smart enough, Sterling might have truly been ruined in my hands." He opened his eyes, his gaze clearer and more resolute than ever. "From today, you will have full authority over company matters. No one can touch your 15% of the shares. Arthur is old now. From now on, Sterling is yours." At that moment, a mix of emotions swelled within me. There was relief, a faint sadness, but not the wild elation I had imagined. What I took over was not just a company, but a weighty responsibility, and a father-daughter relationship that needed slow mending. "Arthur," I said softly, "together, we will take Sterling, which mother left us, to new heights." His eyes welled up, and he nodded heavily. Months later, the Cloud Intelligence Project successfully launched its press conference. As the executive of Sterling, I stood under the spotlight with Julian, the CEO of Starflare, our core partner. We calmly answered the reporters' questions, outlining the project's future plans. On stage, he was professional, intelligent, and radiant. Off stage, after the crowd dispersed, he would naturally drape his jacket over me and offer a cup of warm water. "Ms. Audrey, your performance tonight was perfect," he murmured, with a smile in his eyes. "Mr. Julian, your cooperation was excellent too," I replied with a smile. At the celebration dinner after the press conference, we stood on the terrace, looking down at the city's glittering lights. "Do you remember the first time I helped you out in the parking?" Julian suddenly asked. "I remember. At the time, I thought you were just meddling," I said, raising an eyebrow. He chuckled. "Not meddling. It was a long time coming." I looked at him. "Long ago, at an industry forum, I noticed you. You were still in the project department then, passionately arguing for a proposal, and the spark and determination in your eyes were captivating." His gaze met mine deeply. "Later, when I heard you were engaged, I felt a pang of regret. And then, when I learned about what happened to you, I thought, perhaps my chance had come." "So, you took advantage of my vulnerability when I was at my lowest?" I asked deliberately. "No." He shook his head, his tone growing serious. "I chose to stand by you when you needed an ally most. Audrey, what I've always admired is your own inner light. whether in good times or bad. Now that the troubles are resolved, may I have the honor of formally inviting you on a date? One that's only about our future? He extended his hand to me, his gaze warm and steadfast. I looked at his hand, then at the distant mire where I had once struggled, fought, and finally broken free. Now, before me was a brand new world, and someone who appreciated all my strengths and vulnerabilities. I placed my hand in his, feeling the solidity and warmth. "All right," I said, a genuine smile reaching my eyes. "But the date itinerary has to be decided by me." "I couldn't ask for more," he said, gripping my hand, his smile deepening. The scars of the past might never completely disappear, but they had healed, becoming my strongest armor. I was no longer the Audrey who was forced to endure humiliation at her engagement. I was Audrey, reborn from the ashes, controlling her own life and the future of Sterling. My new life, at this moment, was just truly beginning. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any thoughts about this story, feel free to share them in the comments section. Here is Roses and Love, sharing stories about marriage and women every day. See you tomorrow.